to Chicago. My name is Paulie, and join me as we celebrate the life of Maurice Carver and talk to some of the people that knew him and try to decipher some of the facts from myths. So join me as we embark on a trip to Maurice Carver's place in Texas and try to see what still stands and what lies in his place today. So join me. Stay tuned.
Maurice Carver lived in an old stagecoach station that was converted into a home. Carver's home was most commonly referred to as Bulldog Hill, as his home sat upon a hill. Rumor has it that Maurice's yard holds the record for the most rattlesnake-bit dogs over the years.
Welcome to Texas. I'm on location. I'm standing on what was known as Bulldog Hill back in the 70s. This used to be Maurice Carver's yard. Of course, it's a Whataburger behind me now. This is where it all began many years ago. A lot of today's strains can be traced back to this very spot right here. Paullie's son spent his last days here prior to his death, May 28, 1972. Carver's widow, both in litter sired by Geible on this very spot behind me. Arch Missy, Orphan Annie. I can go on and on as far as the dogs that pastured here. This was also one of the home of one of the largest, biggest known jennies known to exist in the world. Was right here. It was the Maurice Carver's yard with numerous dogs in the 1960s and 70s. He was known to have anywhere from 40 to 50 dogs on this particular yard right here back in the 60s.
But after well, I guess the third issue of the magazine came out, he called me up and he'd say, "Jack, I didn't know you were putting out a magazine." I hadn't even talked to the guy in years, and he's like we're old buddies. So I says, "Yeah." So how much would the back cover cost me for a year? I told him it was $35 for a year in them days, and he took the magazine every time. Well, he was always, at the back of the magazine in them days, all the dogs that he listed on the back were dogs that he sold to other people or for himself. And he'd call me up about every month or so, and he'd say, "I got some more dogs to add to that list." And he'd talk about dogs that I know he never had anything to do with. And I said, "Now, Maurice, you never laid eyes on that dog." He said, "I didn't?" I says, "No, you know you did." "All right, don't put him on the list. Here, put this one on instead." And he'd go on like this. He'd always call me about 1 o'clock in the morning, get me up out of bed. And he'd say, "Did I wake you, Jack?" I know, I was just waiting for you to call. Here, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I just figured you would call me this time.
Just curious as far as any speculation that you might have as far as how she's bred or if she's bred or...
Honey Bunch?
Yeah.
Well, we were riding around one time and Jerry and Crenshaw bought the dog off of Carver. And the dog, they didn't have any...
So they bought the dog? Because I read in other parts where it was hired by Bullet Son. He had just quit at the time and he couldn't sell it. So he says, "I'll send you the dog." This is just something I've read.
No, he sold the dog. They went in partners. I think they paid $400 for the bitch, and they each chipped in $200. And they bought Honey Bunch, and she come in a wooden crate. That was before the days of these fancy crates. And the only papers they had was written on the crate was Bully Son and what's the bitch's name? Amber. Bully Son and Amber. That's the only papers they ever had. When they stopped thinking about it, they said, "Well, how could this dog be a Bully Son? Bully Son was dead right around the time she was born." It was, and that's the only thing that I ever heard them mention as to how she was really bred. She looked like Amber. Amber was a buckskin dog, like Honey Bunch. Of course, Bully Son was a black dog, but that's no proof of anything. But I heard another story from Kinsey Wood that they had Honey Bunch. A fellow named Jerry Bell had bought Honey Bunch. When she was 18 months old, they rolled her. They didn't like her, and they sent her back to Carver. Now, I have no idea whether that's true or not, but I asked Jerry Bell one time about it, and he said that, what the hell did he say? They rolled her, and she wasn't any good, but he had another bitch down there that looked like Honey Bunch, so that's the dog they called Honey Bunch. Wasn't bred that way at all. But who can tell all these stories that way?
I've never heard. Have you ever heard of any litter mates of Honey Bunch or
no.
Any particulars?
No.
It was just, all that kind of stuff adds up to...
Well, there was all kinds of rumors about Carver. He would get pups from different litters and put them all in the same pen. He didn't know himself how they were bred. And when if somebody wanted to buy a pup, he'd take one out that looked like the father or one of the fathers that had been the sire of several litters of pups. Like he might have pups all in the same pen from 3 different sires and 3 different bitches. And he'd put them in the pen and he'd guess as to which was the mother and father when he sold the dog. And if you called and you wanted a dog off a certain male, those pups were going to come out and you were going to buy it.
These were his puppy pens. Some of his pups in this pen was out of Black Widow and Lucky. Bud Womack's Lucky dog. Kearns is Lucky, they called him. And some of them were out of some of the other litters. Had a real nice-sized puppy pen, a roof on it. It was in a barn, open barn, and had wire on the open walls, and it had a roof on it. Dirt bottom. Well, Maurice was such a person. He was such a player and such a dealer in the game. It was like when I first met him was in 1960, in the spring of 1960. He was such a guy. Maurice was then in his 40s. And he wore a very nice suit. He would be in a pinstripe suit with black alligator cowboy boots, a big, fine, nice Texas hat. He had a small mustache, a very small, keen mustache, and he was a real black-headed man. And he smoked long Mexican cheroots, dark papered Mexican cheroots. And this man had a charisma about him that was just, oh, it was just unbelievable. Everybody that met him, they just got a charge of being around him. And from the amount of charisma that he had, he would, everybody that walked off from him would have a smile on their face. He was that type of a character. And there was a few that had frowns on their faces when they left, but it was the ones that he wanted to have a frown on their face. He would mess with people's minds when he would be talking to them in such a way as the stories that he would tell them was like the way when I first met him. There I was, just a young beginner in the game, 20, 21 years old, 1960. In the spring, and I had read a few of the Game Dog magazines, Pit Dog Report, put out by Pete Sparks in those days, and I had some game dogs for a little around a year, somewhere around a year, maybe a little more than a year, a little longer than a year. And I had heard of Maurice, but that was about as much of a beginner as I was. I wasn't familiar with too many different names. There were just a few different names that I was familiar with, such names as Earl Tudor, George Sadler, Joe Cavina, Gaboon Trahan, and that was about the consent of it as to the people that was active at that time. And that was about the only names that I knew of when I went to my first show in Louisiana there, the Gaboon Trahan. I met Maurice. It was right outside the front gate of the barn, and I never will forget it. He was just, this man, he had a way of picking up on everybody he was talking to, and he got to telling me some stories and asking me about different people in my area and everything, and I recognized a few of the names of the people that he called out and everything. And he got to telling me about, why don't I come down and visit him sometime. He told me he had well over 100 game dogs there on his place. He said he had a 2,500-acre ranch and had all kinds of cattle. Said we'd go deer hunting right out of his backyard. As a matter of fact, he said he hunted deer with bow and arrows. And this man was just, you know, he just left me with my mouth hanging open and just a, awe, like, of amazement that this guy would invite me down and everything, and here I am, just a stranger, a rank beginner getting into the game and everything. Oh, this man is something else, really. Quite a guy. Well, after that show, it wasn't but about a month or so later, right around, within a month or so, me and a couple of my friends in this area, we decided to make the trip to San Antonio to go visit Maurice. And so, we get down there and we call and he tells us where we're at and everything. We wasn't but just a little ways down the road and everything. He tells us how to get there. And so we go pulling up, and when we pull into the place, we, well, this really wasn't what we was expecting. But it was a place out in the country, and it was, I remember they had a big water tower there by his house where he lived, and then they had two houses. It was a big frame house of about a 6 or 8 room frame house. It was a nice frame house. It was pretty old, but it was still a nice home. And then on down about, I guess maybe 150 feet, maybe, somewhere around 150 feet, sort of down the hill, there on the same road, was a little 2-room house. And then there was a little barn on down beside it. Well, where Maurice told us to pull up, it was in the driveway, which was a big driveway area, there by the little 2-room house. And we pulled up in there, and as we was getting out, Maurice come walking out of this little 2-room house with his pajamas on and his alligator boots and he had a Texas straw hat on. And he had a big smile on his face, and he was just laughing. And he had about 20 dogs there on his place. Behind his house there was blackjack trees that had cable runs running all between the trees and had dogs on them, and he had beautiful dogs. Real nice, fed dogs. He kept all his dogs on the heavy side. But they was just, he kept them worm-free, and they was just beautiful dogs. They were beautiful dogs. Well, we got out, and went in, and this little house was what was called a cowboy shack. It was called a place for the hired hand. And it wasn't exactly what I was expecting, a big 2,000 or 3,000 acre ranch with a big ranch house, as to my conversation with Maurice when I first met him in the spring. Well, as we talked on there, Maurice was at a time of being between a rock and a hard place. As I learned Maurice, that was a big area of his life, between a rock and a hard place at times. Maurice was very much up and down in his life. His lifestyle was unbelievably interesting. And the stories that was around his lifestyle was just unbelievable. Especially the stories that he told about his lifestyle. Those was the ones that was unbelievable. But as we got to know Maurice, Maurice was a man that he knew every thief, every outlaw in the state of Texas, and many thieves and outlaws throughout the United States. But he knew every one of them in Texas, and every one of them knew him. And he was very much of a con man type of a person. And it was as if he would look at us, as if he looked at us in such a way as if to say, are you so stupid that you believed everything that I said? You know, that was his personality, you know. In other words, you wouldn't even mention the fact of where's the 2,500 acres, or where's all those thousands of cows you own you was telling me about, you know, those hundreds of dogs. In other words, you wouldn't even think of asking him, you know, where was that stuff, because he had a way of expressing himself as if he was almost asking you, were you stupid enough to believe everything that I told you? That was the charisma, the character style of Maurice. Maurice was, in a way, he was like a man of deceit. Deceive. He would deceive everyone in such a way as it was like he would really enjoy seeing just how far he could go with everybody he met. That his style of dealing was like there was always a number of things in each dog deal that he dealt in such a way as he would change their breeding of a lot of the dogs that he dealt. He wouldn't put out the true pedigrees on the dogs. He would change their breedings there. To him, it was like he wanted to know how everybody's dog was bred, but he didn't want the people to know how their own dog was bred. He wanted to know, but he didn't want them to know. It was like it gave him an edge. Years, it was very interesting as to Maurice's lifestyle and his part in the game, the way he lived his life, and I seen it happen I knew in the last 19 years of his life. And I seen the change. He had been in the game 8 years when I met him. And I knew what he had to start with, and I knew what he had when I got to know him there, and I watched his yard change over the years. And in the 60s, Maurice began dealing dogs. And he could deal with people like it was just amazing. You talk about a used car dealer. A used car dealer couldn't come close to dealing with Maurice Carver. Maurice Carver had a deal for everybody. I'm talking, he had a deal for everybody. He could deal a man into buying a piece of paper from him, an old wadded up piece of paper. He had a deal for him. This was his character. And it was as if everyone in the game knew everyone at that time. Everyone knew each other. And no one wanted no one to know that they had been dealing with Maurice, because everybody would know that he beat you in some way. Because Maurice was the type of person that beat everybody he dealt with. He really beat him in some way or another. He put it on him so bad, one way or another, that everybody would know that he did it to you too. So people tried to keep their dealing with Maurice to themselves. But as it turned out, I don't know of hardly anyone in the game that didn't deal with him one time or another. And everybody that ever met him liked him. He had that charisma about him, that he could get along with anybody. And if someone couldn't get along with him, he would single that person out and work on them in such a way that sooner or later they'd be friends with him. In other words, he would just stay on them and work on them until the way he just had a charisma about him that everyone liked him. Everyone always liked him. Everybody dealt with him. Through those 60s, he had some good bred dogs there on his yard that came from that breeding he made from Diabo and Black Widow.
Maurice Carver was able to breed a Diabo because it was a known fact that Earl Tudor had a serious dislike towards Maurice Carver. So I often wondered how Maurice was able to breed his Black Widow Jip to Diabo. It wasn't until I heard the tapes of the late Ed Crenshaw that gave me a little insight. So let's listen to these tapes and you might get a chuckle as I did.
They tricked him out of breeding to Diabo. Do you know anything about that?
Well, that didn't trick him. He just, they just let his sexual lust run away with him. Yeah, Maurice took one of his gals up there. He's a good-looking blonde, you know, and man, old Earl just went goopy-eyed over and everything. And he later told me, he said, I gotta have some of that. And he said, how can we make a deal? And Maurice told him, he said, well, I'll make a deal with you. I'll tell you exactly how a deal will make. He said, I don't know whether you want it that bad or not, Marv. Oh, well, told her, sure, you mean wanted her pretty bad. He said, I'll tell you what. He said that the deal I'll make you is while you're screwing her old Divo, screwing with a bitch. And Earl said, I don't know. Well, he said, well, that's the deal. He said, Earl said, all right, I'll do it. But he said, you never let Heine, he called Heinzel Heine. He said, I'll do it, but you don't ever admit it or let Heine know.
Yeah.
Because it just mean our friendship, because Heinzel hated Maurice.
He did?
Yeah, and so Maurice is fine. I don't give a damn. He said, doesn't matter to me. So they did, and that's how he got the pups. I mean, got little bunches. And later, the word got out that Maurice had pups side by Divo.
I really liked it. In the honey bunch stuff, I don't have a clue. And if I were to, comment one way or another, it'd be purely speculation. But I know that the yards of dogs that were heavy honey bunch, and I had one years ago that was probably 3/4 honey bunch with a little bit of the rascal dog that really suited me, and I really liked this dog. But he was totally different than the bully dogs that I'd had before that were bred more around
Different
Boudreaux stuff. He was a tall hound dog looking dog, and was just a real likable dog. But he's a big dog. He's probably 55 or 60 pounds. He reminds you of the Jeep stuff, but a very good dog. And I've still got a little bit of that today, but just very little.
Okay. But getting back to the question, if you had to speculate, would you suggest that she's sired by Bully Son by little experience that you have on the type of dogs that she's thrown?
I wouldn't say that she wasn't. And I've never been able to look at a dog and tell who their parents were.
Right.
And Maurice's yard, if you ever went down there, there was a lot of variations. Stompin' Otto didn't look like he fit there, but he did. And that's another dog that's down from the Bully Son type stuff. And when I say Bully Son, it's actually Bully Son Eli Jr. stuff.
Right. Speaking about Eli Jr. and whatnot, do you ever see that little bit that they had on the Eli dog, the old 8mm film, and the litter of Bully Son and Eli Jr.?
No, I've heard that, but I never have saw
it. Can you add anything as far as Maurice Carver? Any advice, any comments, anything that he might have shared with you?
Maurice was a card, to say the least. He's a very colorful man. I think at one time probably produced more game dogs than any other man in the United States, maybe any man living at that group of men at that time, because he just had the right dogs and he had the right combination. He sent them to the right people as game dogs go. Maurice was a colorful enough guy that when he told you that he'd say the cake, you didn't have to give the recipe, a lot of people didn't really mind that, because they knew they were getting a pretty good dog in most cases. I was kind of opposite of that, and I told him if he couldn't give me the recipe, I didn't want the cake. And of course he said that Pat would fill me out the papers and he'd guarantee him to be right because Pat did her stuff right. So one of the better stories, just to show you Maurice's take on bulldogs and selling dogs and what have you. Maurice was a salesman. Jeff McManus had went down early one morning to Maurice's, and early for Maurice is about 10 or 11, and he'd usually have on his long johns. And Jeff said, Maurice, what are you doing? He said, I'm getting ready to sell a dog. Some people's coming in here from the East Coast, some of them Yankee fellas, and they're going to get this puppy right here. And Jeff said, well, my God, Maurice, that's the ugliest, naughtiest little puppy you've got. What makes you think they'll get him? He said, just trust me, son. He said, just watch the master at work. So the people got there, and Maurice had priced them some puppies for $500, which was a big price in that day. And so while they were looking at the puppies and stuff, they said, well, what about that little ugly dog there? He said, oh, I dare some sell this dog. I'm keeping him for myself. And they said, well, why is that, Maurice? Oh, said that's the cream of the crop right there. Now, I couldn't sell him to you for $500, but I might talk Pat and I'll let you have him for $8. Well, guess which dog they got? So that was Maurice's lot in life, was not necessarily trickery, but knowing human nature. And of course, Maurice run a lot of gals, and was probably into more illegal activities than we need to know about. So he was quite the guy, and I certainly enjoyed Maurice.
I have always heard that he was mainly a broker, but he was a good judge of dogs, and he knew where all the good dogs were. So he would, if somebody needed a good dog, he'd go back in the days when prices were different. He'd buy a dog for $200 and sell it to someone else for $500, and it'd go directly from that person to the other one, so there was no cost to business.
See where you're at.
Yeah, but he knew they were good dogs, and so consequently he had all these good dogs that he had sold, and got a reputation for putting out good dogs. When I knew Carver, he was a young dog man then, and I mean, of course, I was a lot younger, but Bob Hemphill and Bob O'Neill and George Sadler, some of those guys were trying to help him. And in fact, Bob Hemphill asked him, he said, well, Maurice, they don't pronounce his name Maurice. He said, Maurice, why don't you breed dogs? He says, well, Bob, I don't have the patience for him to grow up. I can't wait for him to grow up, so I'm never going to be a breeder. And that's interesting because he actually did become a fairly good breeder, I think. But there was only a core of dogs that he was breeding himself. There was apparently a lot of these other transactions going on too.
Well, that's where I kind of get mixed up. Every now and then they'll say it's a Carver bred dog or whatnot. And to be honest with you, you really didn't see him, or if you looked at the certain pedigree, I couldn't figure out why they were calling it a Carver dog, other than he sold it.
Right. And I think he really gave pedigrees with his dogs. So you weren't always certain how they were bred.
Some other honey bunch. I've never heard of any litter mates or any other particular dogs off that same breeding or being litter mates to that dog. Have you ever come across anything as far as...
No, I haven't. And there's always been the question whether she was really by Bully Son or not. And I know that James Crenshaw and what was his partner's name? Well, anyway, you know his partner's name, right?
Garrett?
Not Garrett, but I just can't think of his name. That was James Crenshaw's partner. Well, anyway, Martha told him to come get this female because now that it's right after Bully Son's match, he says now that Bully Son's quit, he's not going to be able to sell this female anyway. So it was a gift, and she turned out really great. Now I don't know if they knew about any brothers or sisters to her.
See, I'd read somewhere about that and whatnot, but the same thing that you're just saying, that at the time Bully Son had quit, and it's one of the reasons that I heard it was even a gift that they didn't even buy the dog. You know. who's to say? And that's why I'm just trying to find out if anybody has ever heard of any litter mates. And to my knowledge, as of right now, there's nobody ever had another dog off of that.
Yeah, I haven't heard.
No, I've written the ADBA just to see if there's any dogs registered under that sire and dam, and other than Honey Bunch, they don't have anything as far as that goes. Just a lot of speculation as far as Honey Bunch and Maurice Carver and whatnot. Are you familiar with the Bully Son dogs? Have you ever really ever worked with them particular type of dogs or see them a lot?
I've seen them. I haven't worked with them.
The reason I'm asking is I'm asking maybe because of course we'll never know how she was really bred or if she was really bred the way she says she was bred. I'm looking for similarities as far as maybe if you can, since you've seen a lot of Bully Son dogs, is she typical of a Bully Son dog?
From people that I've seen, people I've talked with have seen her said that she was. She had similar disposition. And of course she had ability. And so I suspect that she probably was bred that way. I'm not happy about that because I'm not high on Bully Son. A Jeep I love. You know, both dogs I know only by reputation. But so I'm not eager to have him be a grandson of Bully Son. But I think that's probably the way it was.
Well, right.
Some of us
I have
good dogs, but not producers. You see what I'm saying? And you basically everything. And
yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question. It's kind of a tough question, but at the same time, if you if I had to change anything, I don't know what I would change, but I will say this: the dogs that I've had in the past, I owe to the dogs themselves, because if I didn't have an excellent dog, I couldn't have did what I did with them. And I think the timing and the selection of good dogs. You know, I had the Carver dogs, and my success came after I got the Carver dogs. So that was a good choice of dogs, and then I took it from there. I tried to have my program. I improved my program.
As we continue our trip, ascending up the mountain, our next guest not only knew Maurice, but had purchased several dogs from Maurice over the years. He is held in legendary status among the fraternity. In short, he is a celebrity of sorts. He recalls and is familiar with dogs directly from Maurice's yards. Dogs such as Snooty, Champion Rascal, Miss Pool Hall Red, and Champion Honey Bunch. He's also owned Champion Zebo and the Champion Homer dog, among many fine others. His peers include Katie Marlowe, which, by the way, he vividly recalls the Red Boy dog as if it were yesterday. In any event, in case you haven't figured it out, we're speaking about the legendary breeder, the old mountain man, Lester Hughes.
That's the resting place of Champion Homer. The mountain man. There's the final resting place.
than others.
Yeah.
Or meet Maurice Carver?
Yeah.
Was this prior, before him producing Honey Bunch, or is after he made a name for himself?
It was before.
Before?
Yeah.
Did you ever match into him?
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever meet?
Maurice Carver, I was nobody.
Okay. Is there anything that you can tell me about?
He was the man at that time.
Oh, he was the... Okay.
He was the man. Carver was the man.
Now, he had a reputation, or from what I gather from people that used to do business with him, that he would replace dogs if they did not work out. Is there any truth to that?
He'd replace dogs, but he always wanted some more money. He would replace them, but he wants more money. Not as much as he would ordinarily if he hadn't wanted to replace him. Like if you sold your dog for $1,000 and it quit, if you took it back to him, he'd probably take it back and on another $300. That's breeding the best producing bitch for me that I've ever owned. A little bitch from Maurice Carver called Susie.
How was she bred?
She's supposed to have been out stomping out on, what was her mother's name? Do you remember, Cole?
Not Art Smithy, though.
But some people from out in Texas said she's out of Florida's Lucky and Florida's Lady. I don't like to say things like that. I don't really know. But they said you could order a pup from Maurice Carver and he'd go so and buy you one and send it to you. I don't know if that's true or not.
The dealings that you did with him, did you go up to his place?
No.
Did he ship you the dog?
He shipped me the dog. Shipped a friend of mine the dog. And she had a bad stoppage on. And I had it fixed, but I wasn't 100%. And I bred her 3 times. And she produced 4 champions, I believe.
Now, I'm curious. Maurice Carver was known to not send paperwork or document that, but he said he would scribble out.
I don't know that he did that.
You never got anything with your pup? You just got your pup?
I got papers. His shoulders been out stomping out on.
Oh, so it was registered? Because I heard a lot of things that he never would register a dog.
Yeah, he registered him.
I guess you trust him, or it didn't matter?
It didn't matter. She produced, and that's all that mattered to me.
I definitely want to thank you for your interview and sharing this with us.
Well.
This is a dog on Maurice Carver's yard. This was Womack's lucky dog when he was on Maurice Carver's yard. He was down on Maurice's yard. He had been bred to Black Widow. And those pups in that pen there's some of those pups that's in the pen that is out of this dog here and the Black Widow female. This was when Black Widow was still on Maurice Carver's yard. This dog was bred off of Jim Williams's yard. He was a Cyclone bred dog. Sire was a dog called Cyclone. Awful deep, dead game dog. This was the dog off of Tudor's Diabo and Black Widow. This was a dog called Outlaw. Maurice had 3 of them there. Outlaw, Cracker, and Lasso. They were all 3 out of Black Widow. There was young dogs there, close to 2 years old. Beautiful dogs. Maurice had a beautiful dog yard. It was blackjack trees, blackjack oak trees, and cables running about 10 foot off the ground with chains on the cables, and each dog had a long run. Now this was Black Widow. She was off with another dog in between her there. These pictures are over 40 years old. I took them with a little 8mm camera that just first came out in the 50s. But we did get some pretty good images back then. This is the dog Lucky again. Kearns is Lucky. We were on a trip to pick this dog up and bring him back to Bud Womack's yard when Bud Womack and I went to Maurice Carver's yard when we was on Maurice's yard here. This is in 1960, I believe. That was Black Widow again back there. You can see his dogs went all down in there. He also had that Rusty dog on there. This is another picture of that Lucky dog. He also had Ed Crenshaw's Colby dog there called Rusty. He was on his yard there at that time also. There was also another dog. That was the Black Widow bitch again there. There was also another dog called Jim Dandy. It was a white dog there that Maurice later matched. That's an outhouse, an outdoor outhouse that's down by those trees there. That was the Jim Dandy dog there. A little brown on the side of his head. White dog. Bred from Joe Covina, from Gaboon Trahan's yard. This is the Rascal dog. This dog belonged to Gaboon Trahan at the time. This is the dog that was a half-brother to Tudor's Diabo. This dog was bred by Joe Covina and dealt to a man down in Lafayette. First dealt to a man in Texas called Hanson, and then later Hanson dealt him to I believe Maurice got him, and then after Maurice got him, Gaboon Trahan got him. This is one of the dogs on Maurice's yard beside his pit. His pit was in this brick building standing to the left there. I don't recall exactly what dog that was. No, that's the lasso dog is what dog that is. That's the lasso dog standing there beside the pit. He has the trim ears. He was a light-colored dog with a blue-black nose. He was a reddish dog with a blue-black nose. I later seen him matched into Leo Kennard. This was his dog yard. Those are little blackjack oak trees with cable runs. Those are dog houses all down in there you see. This is the rascal dog again. He was a dark brindle dog, almost black brindle. He was a half-brother to Tudor's Dabo. It was out of the same sire, different females. Long-bodied dog. He also had a dog called Snake on his yard that I later matched into with Frank Fitzwater's Goldie dog. That was Maurice's pit in that building there. With that lasso dog back there. This was the Cracker dog, Lasso's brother. I believe this is the rascal dog again there. That dog, I said he was deal to Hanson. He was deal to a guy in Louisiana named Peplus or something like that. And then Trahan got him from him, is the way it was. Maurice never got a hold of this dog. He belonged to Gaboon Trahan while he was on Maurice's yard here. But Joe Covina bred him and sold him down to Louisiana. It's quite a dog. I believe that's the outlaw dog, the black dog called Outlaw, that was out of Tudor's Dabo and the Black Widow female. This was the lucky dog again. This was a dog bred from Gaboon Trahan's yard. He was of some of the Covina breeding, bred like that Jim Dandy dog that he had on his yard there. I don't recall the dog's name, but I recall the breeding on the dog. He was from Trahan, of some Covina bred dogs. These are his puppies, his puppy pen. That was the rascal dog again.
And we raised a lot of good dogs off her, and even the dogs straight off her, even the dogs like Jeep that was straight off her, some of those has produced equally as well as she did herself by keeping that line pure. The second and third and fourth generation are still just as good percentage-wise as she herself was. And that is select. She protected her run, and I don't think she was people aggressive, but you would think she was. She gave you that impression. You'd think she'd eat you up because she was a typical bully son dog. That's probably the next question you're going to ask about. No, she was. She protected her run, and even someone could go up there and they would just be sure they would get bit. But they probably wouldn't, but they didn't want to take the chance.
Right, it's just the impression.
Yeah, travel with their sons and all of them. We traveled a lot.
Did she ever lose her teeth in any of the times? Up until retirement, she had her teeth?
You know, she had a couple broken teeth, but she still had her teeth.
Hangers?
Yeah.
I've noticed similarities within the honey bunch strains, such as black marks or black things on the tail, black peppered stuff here.
Right.
Is there any similarities that maybe I haven't, or maybe you that work with the strain, or develop the strain, is there any other similarities that you see with
No.
Do you agree with the little black spot on the tail?
Yeah, but that's common with a lot of other dogs, too, not just her. And I've heard the comment, you have a black circle around the tail and a little black hair up the back, and say that's the honey bunch in them. Honey bunch had to get it from somewhere. Might be the bully son in them, but it's still there.
Okay. Can you maybe clarify the rumors surrounding her death? I've read in one book that it was because she was on a spring pole and she fell and she broke her tail or something, got an infection from it. She ended up dying from that. I've heard numerous other stories. Can you clarify any, or maybe to your knowledge?
Stuck in a basement, and she got these sores that it's lack of sunlight, where you don't get sunlight, then these sores get worse and worse, and she had a series of sores, and she was just neglected. I think rather than abused, neglected was probably the best word, and just died from that.
Well, I'm glad you clarified that. Some of these things I actually go to bed at night sometimes wondering, or I wondered if I could ever ask you, and I didn't want to bombard you over the phone or something, you know who you're talking to.
Oh, yeah, well.
But I appreciate that some of this stuff is for my own purposes.
Okay, no problem.
I've seen who owned Honey Bunch at the time that she was bred to Zebo. I just recently read about that, and I never really got around to that. And
I was just thinking that guy Richard.
You don't have any knowledge of how many were in that litter or where those offspring went.
Zebo.
Yeah, I mean,
they were around as late as a couple of years ago. A guy over in Virginia had one of them. 2 or 3 years ago had one of them, but he said the dog had never started.
Yeah, well, I heard it wasn't very successful.
They didn't work out.
Okay. All right, but because on paper, I mean, that looked like it was an awesome breeding. Can I assume you're still breeding? been using Honey Bunch as your base in your yard today?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that was. Can you give me like I don't want to pry too much, but like a formula? What do you bring? Is a quarter Red Boy, 3/4 Jeep, vice versa? I mean, what do you use?
Well, I like the Jeep Red Boy combination. If you've got a Jeep Red Boy dog 50-50, I think you can cross it with anything. But the Jeep Red Boy works as one strain rather than a cross. Okay. Because they've been, for 5 and 6 generations, they've been Jeep Red Boy, not Jeep or not Red Boy. So that kind of establishes its own line. Okay. So you can use them like a pure line.
Okay. I see the common outcrosses is the Jeep and Rascal and Jeep and Red Boy. Have you ever tried another cross?
Yeah.
Have you ever tried?
Midnight Cowboy.
Midnight Cowboy?
I know y'all are big Honey Bunch fans, and I like that old bitch myself. I was visiting Irish Jerry back in the 80s, and I would go down there pretty often, hang out with him in Decatur and party. And during one of those trips, he showed us this box and told us it was the crate that Maurice Carver sent Honey Bunch to him in. And as the weekend went on and the funds got lower, I offered to buy it, and I can't remember, it was like $200 or $300, and he was like, you know, I was crazy, I didn't want to pay that kind of money for that old box, and I pulled the money out. He took the money, I took the box, and I probably haven't taken care of it like I should. You can see they're still using it, and let them old cats get in there, but if you look, you can see how well made it is. Look, it's even got wing nuts up here that hold it together. A well-made piece.
Did it have anything written on it when you...
Nah, there was nothing written on it. This gate was more blue. It had more blue on it. It was painted blue, and it's rusted over, but that was the only thing that's really changed on it.
How long have you owned it?
I got it in, let's see, I don't remember what year it was, 88. So I've had it close to 20 years.
My goodness.
Of course, you know, old Jerry, man, I love him to death, man. He's a real dog, man. He might have sold 50 boxes just like it.
Last one to finish this off. There must be at least one comment or moment or advice or something, one tidbit from the old Maurice Carver that's stuck with you over the time. Can you share that with us? Something that stuck in your mind. Maybe he told you something or a little.
Yeah, he told me a lot, and there's probably a half a dozen things that I could think of, but probably the most important thing was don't be afraid of them, son. You know, just going out there and bump heads and see one out there and get it on.
Part 2 includes such scenes as this clip featuring James Crenshaw, a top-notch breeder who started with breeding stock from the yard of Maurice Carver. He initially purchased several dogs back in the day and never had to change up his breeding program since. He is seen here giving some insight on his success over the years. This clip includes Grand Champion Blackjack when he was still owned by James, just before he sold him to Casino Kennels. Also included is Irish Jerry reminiscing about his direct dealings with Maurice Carver when he had purchased Honey Bunch, as well as researching the whole bit on Bully Son. There are many more interviews included, such as Don Mayfield, Richard Stratton, Jack Kelly, not to mention the vintage footage of old Pete Sparks, the hobby breeder and author of the magazine Your Friend and Mine. Also included is another famous breeder, Baker Davis, which was made famous simply by buying dogs directly from the yard of Maurice. He has owned some of the greatest dogs, such as the Grand Champion Boomerang Dog, Chivo, and Midnight Cowboy. And of course, a documentary cannot be complete without visiting the legendary grave of Maurice Carver.
Hi, welcome to part 2. Maurice Carver made a major mark in the dog game, most notably surrounding Bully Son. Let's take a closer look and examine this dog. I suppose we can start with Boudreaux's Eli, the sire to Bully Son. This is a rare 8mm footage of a clip taken countless years ago of Boudreaux's Eli. Eli was sired by Boudreaux's Scrub out of Boudreaux's Candy, a very desirable stud dog and foundation dog of many strains today. Shortly after this film was taken, Eli was stolen and never recovered. Before Eli was stolen, he was bred to many gyps, including this one in the background. This is Boudreaux's Spook. Here she can be seen pregnant and carrying the litter that would soon have a tremendous impact in the dog world as we knew it. The red dog is unknown to me, but that Spook in the background, Bully Son's dam. If my memory serves me correctly, this was taken years ago on Jerry Clemens' yard. He was the owner of Spook at the time. When she had her first heat cycle, Jerry took her back to Floyd to breed to his dog Eli. This is the most famous litter, past or present, sired by Eli out of Boudreaux Spook. Who was to know that this litter containing Bully Son, Eli Jr., Brandy, and Lady was soon to make a tremendous impact in the dog game and make Carver a household name with the dog Bully Son that would soon change Carver's life.
I think that was Junior he got his arm.
Yeah, I think
Junior was blacker than the others.
Look at it. Watch this shot over. Look at it now.
And she's white. White with white in the muzzle. Just run down here in a second. Make sure it don't get stuck or nothing.
It should come on line, man.
There's nursing, look at old Brenda there. That's Bully Son going over there with that white on his chest.
Isn't that something?
He had the biggest
Here it is.
white spot on it.
Yeah, I mean, who is responsible for breeding Bully Son?
Well, if I can put this in the right order, I have a friend, still have a friend, Mr. Jerry Clements from Sunnyvale, Texas. I gave him a little female by the name of Spook. She was maybe some 8 months. And in her first heat cycle, he came to visit, and I had this black dog named Eli. And we looked around the yard, of course I had several dogs at the time. And I don't think that was Clemens' first pick, but as he walked through the yard, and the more he observed Eli, the more he liked him. Eli was a small dog, some 38 pounds, I guess. Yeah, 38 to 40. And he asked me what I thought, and I said, as far as I'm concerned, the way the female was bred and the way the Eli was bred, that was good as any. So he decided to go that way, and brought 4 pups.
Do you remember if there was a stud fee, or
Pardon?
Was there a stud fee, or you just let him breed to the dog? Or?
No, he was a friend. Back in that respect, with the stud fee and the puppies, I'd be willing to say I gave more puppies away and bred more dogs for free than anybody I know of. I just kind of a yes man, I guess. What goes around comes around, and you need favors, and I was always thinking that it'd come back to me in time. In Mr. Clemens' case, it came back several times. He was good to me, good man. In that particular litter, they had 4 pups, 3 of them black, 1 brindle. They had 2 males, 2 females. They had Bully Son, Eli Jr., a black female named Lady, or Mr. Pat Perry, and then a brindle one for Jerry, that he called Brandy. Probably Brandy was the biggest and probably had the best mouth. And then the next one would be Bully Son, probably, and then Eli Jr. and then Lady.
Who first owned Bully Son?
Jerry Clemens did. In other words, he had the mother and raised the litter, yeah. And he sold that dog for $400 as a puppy. He sold them all but Brandy. He kept the brindle female. He sold Eli Jr. to a boy by the name of Doug Night Rider. And then Doug, in turn, sold him to Benny Clayton, where he remained until he passed away.
Now, you talking about Bully Son?
Eli Jr.
Eli Jr. Okay. How old was he when he died, as far as Eli Jr.?
I don't recall.
Eli Jr. died when he was 9, 10, 11.
Or younger than that.
8.
If I recall correctly, he was probably 17 model, I think.
Eli Jr.?
That's about when he was born. I think somewhere 70. Pretty damn close.
What, he died from just old age, or was there a kennel accident?
No, he died of the results of the event against him and his son, Benny Bob.
Okay. Okay, no, I'm talking about Eli Jr.
Oh, Eli, I'm sorry. No, Eli Jr. just died of old age.
How old was he?
Pretty good age, but I couldn't tell you.
Over 10?
No, we got the dogs kind of confused,
right,
and we'll just make it clear. But Eli Jr. died, let's back up. Clemens sold him to Doug Knight, rather, and the price was $400. And then Doug had him hooked up against Ken Allen, and Benny Clayton bought him before the contest. And Eli Jr. was 17 months old at the time. He came off real good in that event. And Benny didn't do anything with him after that besides bred him a very few times. A very selected female. Benny wasn't into breeding him out of his yard.
I guess I'm trying to figure how did Maurice get Bully Son on his yard?
Let's see. Pardon me if I can tell you about that. I don't know for sure. I would say probably, and don't quote me on this because it may not be accurate, I think he either sold him to Red Walling, was a banker, or to Bobby Hall, one or the other. Now Bobby's the one who did all the work.
I'm trying to figure out if this is Red Walling. See the bottom picture? I've never seen a picture of Red Walling. I'm trying to figure out who that person is. That's what Bully said.
Yeah, that could very well be. I don't, and I don't say that would be Red, because Red was a young man. Yeah, Mr. Walling was a young fellow. And my eyes are too poor, I couldn't tell you that.
Is he still alive today?
I would think so. I would think so.
He wasn't much of a dog man at the time, though.
Not at all. He was just a gambler. It was just an investment.
Okay. I've always wondered that.
That I can't answer. I don't know.
Okay. Because, I mean, Red Walling registered him.
Yes.
But he already had a name.
Yeah.
So, okay. So.
And I don't know if he went from Clemens to Bobby Hall, and Bobby sold him to Red Walling. I don't think Red Walling bought him from Clemens, I wouldn't think. That I'm not sure.
Bobby claims in his book that he did. He sold it to or he sold a portion of it to.
Well, that would be accurate.
I was looking for everywhere in all my old magazines, my books. I wanted to find a picture of you and Bully Son so you could sign it. But I can't find a picture of you and Bully Son.
No, I kept Bully Son. I kept all of them with Brandy. I didn't have Brandy on my place, but I kept all the rest at one time or another. I kept Bully Son a good while. In his younger years, that's so.
How long would you say, for periods at a time, or he came to your yard one time and then?
No, he came to me at an early age, and I kept him.
Before he made a name for himself?
Pardon?
Before he made a name for himself?
Yes, before. Yes.
He was on your yard. Did you breed to Bully Son while he was on your yard?
I didn't have to. I had his dad, and that's where I run my business. I breed to what brings the good ones.
Okay. Bully Son was said to have been bitten by a snake.
Two things happened to that dog. One was he got bitten by a rattlesnake.
Here's a picture where they claimed he was. That's Maurice and Bully. It's claimed he was bit by a snake, and
he was.
That is a fact.
Yep. That's a good picture of Maurice and a good picture of Pat.
Pat with Bully Son, yeah.
Yep. And then after this snake bite, he got into an accident through the chain link fence and receipted all his guns.
While on Maurice's yard?
On Maurice's yard, yes. And Maurice told Red Wally that the dog wasn't fit to be in that particular contest. And Red said bring him regardless. And that's Red's exact words. And what Carver did, Mr. Jerry Clemens was your lab technician at the hospital. Check Molison's blood count, and the dog was anemic. The blood count was 33, and it should be 46.
You know that for a fact?
To be true, yes. I staked my reputation on it. It did happen. Okay. Mr. Clemens is very well alive today.
Now, who's the one that says that he fought through the chain link fence? Because if you look at his yard and all that, or pictures, or he didn't have any chain link on his fence. So I'm trying to figure out where that came from.
That's what Carver said. You know, he had him in a. Now Carver had a. Now I don't know how many kennels he had. The way he kept his pups was a big old chain link.
Okay. Now, when you say chain link,
it's like a hurricane wire.
Here's a picture of one of his dogs on his yard, and just to show you what something saying like that, not actually chain link, but something like that.
Well, let's just maybe I'll stand corrected. I'm just telling you like they told it to me.
No, well, I'm just saying while you were on his yard, is that what you seen, or did you see chain link for yourself?
I saw this.
Because I never seen chain link.
I saw where the puppies was. I thought it was a chain link pin.
Okay.
Of course, you know what it is. Let's just say, in between the time, things will change. The man could have very well dismantled that and and upgraded it.
Well, see, I research things, and I try, since there's a lot of rumors and there's a lot of, you don't know what to believe. So if you do some investigation work in certain things, some stuff will fall apart right away. And other stuff I try to find out, because it's very well true. Things happen and change and stuff like that.
Well, so you move the pin.
So I always look for pictures. I'm always interested in finding pictures of Maurice Carver's yard. Yeah, and I try to see certain things that were in back there like that. I've never seen any actual chain link. I've seen like what I just showed you, that type of panels and stuff.
Well,
like
that's
that.
probably just one pin, or just partial of the yard.
Okay, I have his puppy pins on that video. Mayfield went on his yard and took an 8mm camera and ran it on his yard, and we have that. So I want you to see.
Maybe we stand corrected about the chain link. It might have been just 2x4 wire.
Okay.
But now the part with the guns being receded, they were.
Okay. How hot was it really that day? They claimed that day of the convention it was a hot day.
A little better than warm.
Okay.
Yeah, it was hot.
If you had to guess, what were the temperatures? I'm hearing 100.
I would say that. I would say 100. Very well, pretty close.
Okay.
Give or take a degree or two.
Right. Okay.
I know that things didn't look right, and this was a big deal for that day and time, and I would say that that's probably what happened to him. Although it was a day of upsets, so it's a situation that hindsight's 20/20. But Bully was certainly a dog that suited Maurice, and of course Bobby Hall. He told stories of having to get on his car so Bully couldn't get him and chunking food to him and stuff. But I saw Bully, and I never seen him act quite that way. But if Maurice went to lead him, he always kept him on a long rope. So if he wanted to get something, he had it locked to his belt. He'd just throw it down so Bully thought he was loose and go after it, and then he'd just reel him in because Maurice conditioned him and hand walked him quite a bit. But Bully would turn around and bite you and get loose. That's the only time I ever really been biting anybody.
Why is your dislike on Bully, son?
Only because of the
equating
disposition. And then I've heard that that's been exaggerated, that he really wasn't as people mean as he came out in Paulie Hall's book, that he was maybe excitable and difficult to handle, but not just a man-eater type of dog. I don't know, but I've heard it both ways.
It was about that time when Maurice started really wheeling and dealing with the owner of Bully Son, who was Red Walling. Bobby Hall and Red Walling had the dog on some type of a partnership deal. And Bobby sold out to Red Walling. And then Red Walling took the dog to Maurice, because Maurice was known in that era, you know, all through South Texas and everything. And Maurice was the one that, you know, the people that owned the good dogs, they wanted to get their dogs in Maurice's hands because he could make such a reputation for them. And Maurice had such an ability to be able to get the kind of dogs that he wanted in his yard. He had that kind of ability, especially with someone like Red Walling, who was a beginner in the game. And Red Walling was a businessman that had quite a bit of money. And Maurice really liked dealing with people like Red Walling. Maurice had a way of dealing and a way of setting himself up with people that it was just unbelievable. The ability that he had to do that with such a low value of truth as to the way he went about it and was able to do it. And it was like always, the people that he did it to, they would know. It was as if they would know what Maurice was doing to them the whole time. They would know that Maurice was just using them the whole time, but they would still go for it. It was just the excitement of the game. But it wasn't no time until Maurice had Bully Son in his yard there. By this time, Maurice had, he had so many different stories going throughout the United States about Bully Son. It was unbelievable, the stories that he was telling about this dog. He was telling stories about all of this dog's life in such a way that he had kept the dog real close to his house up there. And he would fool with the dog all the time in such different ways as just, he had all kinds of stories to tell about him. And this dog, he created such a dog, as you could say more or less, like he put Bully Son up on top of a mountain all by himself in the game. He had a reputation as being such an outstanding dog that game had never before seen. This dog was like a beast that the game had never before had seen or heard of. It was the reputation that Maurice had of this dog going.
Bully Son had a reputation for producing world-class offspring. Bully Son produced numerous notable dogs. As for Bully Son as a producer, Baker Davis can attest to that. Mr. Davis' fame was gained by simply purchasing dogs sired by Bully Son. Dogs like Shiloh and the Great Midnight Cowboy, just to name a few. Here he can be seen with one of his all-time favorites, the legendary Grand Champion Boomerang, also from the yard of Maurice Carver. Definitely a top producer in his day.
He doesn't seem terribly aggressive to me.
Yeah.
He's got it bred in him, does he?
Yeah. For most of them are real good pets to humans, but they just don't like another dog or animal, any kind of animal they don't like. Now that dog there would catch a horse, cow, anything that would move he'd catch besides a human.
And what would he do to it when he caught it?
He would try to kill it. Or you know, if he caught a cow or a horse, he would just have to get him a bite and hang on.
I can remember Maurice Carver. Oh, he was a great storyteller. this man, he had a part of life about him that was of such color and such storytelling. And when we'd be at the big shows around and we'd be in the motels and everything, he would come out in the motel in the morning, and most everybody would be up real bright early in the morning. Real bright early. They would be up and they'd be walking out around through the motel lot, the parking lot and everything, and everybody would just be milling and talking to one another in those years, you know, there at a show. Maurice, he would step out of his room, and he would usually have his boots on and his pajamas on. And sometimes he'd have his hat on. A big white hat or a big black hat. A cowboy western cut hat. And I've seen him step out of his room and just scream, loud as he could scream, just scream. And they might be 40 or 50 different ones out in the motel parking lot just walking around talking dog stories to one another. Now you got to think now, let's go back to the 60s, 1960s, 1970s is when this was. It was a little different era of time. And it wouldn't be but just by the time Maurice got through with his scream, he would just be circled with different people. There'd just be a circle around him, and he would be telling game dog stories. He had a voice that when he talked from down through his chest, and he had a real character-speaking voice that really reached out to people. And he was a great storyteller. Oh, he was a great storyteller. He could tell stories in such a way as he would just get everybody involved in it when he would be telling the stories. Maurice was such a liar that after so many of his stories, you felt like you had been, like he was using you in some way. You felt as if he was insulting your intelligence. The more you go to listening to his stories, you would go to thinking that some way he's insulting your intelligence for you to believe everything that he's telling. But he was a great storyteller. He was a great storyteller.
And contacted him. He sent me, the first dog he sent me was the champion Lobo dog. He became champion. He was just 16.
Was it that off that night train?
No, off of Snow, off Crenshaw Snow. Ed Crenshaw, by the way.
Right.
Crenshaw Snow and Miss Wiggles, which I think was off Snow. Double-bred Snow is what Lobo was. Excellent dog.
Well, that leads me to my next question. How many dogs did you acquire, including Honey Bunch, from Carver?
From Carver?
Yeah.
Probably about 5 or 6.
Did they all work out for you?
Oh yeah, all of them. I didn't get a bad one.
He had the reputation of replacing dogs. I mean, is that correct? Because I hear that from other people that if you don't like a dog or he didn't work out for you, send it back to him. He send you another one.
Yeah, I'm sure he probably did that. He never had to replace any for me.
Instead of asking Mr. Kelly or anybody else, this is the opportunities that I had to talk to you about this. Can you remember the direct dealing of the conversation that got you on the phone and phoned for Honey Bunch? What came about that? Were you looking for a female at that particular time, or?
Oh, what about Honey Bunch?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, just a pup. And
you were interested in a female or just anything you had at the time?
No, definitely a female.
Okay.
Definitely a female. So, you know, being off Bully Son, I was really proud of that.
I believe she's sired by Bully Son? With all that speculation?
Yeah, I have to say that, yeah.
Is that just because you trust the dealing that you had with Carver at the time, or is it because you see what she throws? What leads you to believe that she's bred?
No, yeah, knowing the nature. I had 3 dogs off Bully Son on my yard, and just knowing the nature of the dog,
And
well, many
kind of the dogs that it. So, you know, even a son, I know a son of his could probably produce one that would look just the same. But at that time, see, the controversy was when Bully's son died. That was the controversy, because they were saying, you know, some people were saying he was selling Bully's son pups, you know, after he died. But see, you can breed a dog, and it can die and still sire pups, you know, for a couple of months. But if you know, and that's probably what happened. But you know, controversies come up and people want to talk. But yeah, knowing the nature of the dogs, and you know, she was just everything just like Bully's son, and produced, you know, just as well.
So all the what a lot of people believe, and for reasons and a lot of speculation, that she was sired by Champion Iron. And as far as, you know, just with the speculation, I'm pretty sure you've heard that yourself.
Well, yeah, you hear a lot of things.
Why would they even consider that at the time, or why would it lead people to believe that? Because Bully's son had died?
No. There was no shame in. Yeah, I think probably before I ever got her, before I ever saw her, I think Bully's son was dead. Which would mean that he sent her to me after Bully's son was dead, but he could have lived past her birth, and I think that's, you know, I did a little research on it, and the best I could figure out from her date, and the best nobody could really pinpoint and tell me exactly when he died, you know. So I really, as close as I get, he's within a few months there, you know. So that told me I don't see the controversy. Just never considered it that much.
Okay. Well,
I had no reason to, and the reason, I had a lot of experience with ironhead stuff. Totally different looking dogs. The build is similar, but they're shorter hair. They're a little more muscular, and yeah, I just you know, compared it with Bully's son. You know, she just looked like a Bully's son dog. Buck, almost exactly the same. Yeah, heavy coated, buckskin, black nose, black mouth, black down their tail, and you know, there's a lot of
pedigree goes,
cat quarter or whatever.
How did you ever receive any paperwork, or was it just his word telling you how she was bred?
No, I had to. He sent me the papers on her later on.
Oh, okay. So she in fact. Well, okay. Okay. So
yeah,
she was registered before you had her, or you're the one that went in and registered?
No, he sent it to me written out on a blank pedigree, written out in his handwriting. You know, the sire and the dam, and.
So what they say about him, you know, not registering dogs and wouldn't pay the fee to register dogs, that it was basically like you said.
I don't. You know, I don't think he would.
Would you recognize Maurice Carver's writing if you saw it?
Yeah.
The reason I say that, I've collected over the years people that have certain dealings with him, and just like you say, I've written down, and they're allegedly said to be from Carver, but I've never known somebody that can actually maybe decipher his writing.
He printed something.
Let me tell you, the other ones, I've got 3 of them, and from 3 different parts of the country, and they all have the same writing. So it kind of led me to believe that they might be authentic. Whether it's true, I don't know.
There's a lot of printing.
Yeah, you know what? I should have brought those for you to take a look at, but I'll mail them out to you.
Yeah, mine got burned up.
Okay, so as far as the paperwork goes.
He talked about, he sent me the paperwork and talked about the little Jip, he called her.
Okay. Well, see, now that, elaborating that...
She didn't have a name at that time.
So you believe in that she is sired by Bully's son. Did you ever see that footage before I sent it to you? The footage with Eli and Bully's son, and Eli as a pup?
Yeah.
Oh, you had seen that before?
No, but I...
You knew it existed?
One picture of Eli. I think I'd seen that, and there's a couple more things in there I'd seen before, but no.
You had never seen Bully's son? Can you tell me what your feelings were at that particular point to see that the sire to your honey bunch at that particular age?
Yeah, that
running around.
Yeah, that was nice. I was wondering where you come across that.
Can you elaborate as far as when you first received her? What were your thoughts on Honey Bunch when you first got her from the airport and you laid hands on her? I mean, or you laid your eyes on her? Were you happy with what you saw? Do you like buckskin, or did it matter? Do you recall?
Yeah, I recall, but you know, the thing about it is, I didn't, I was excited to get a dog from Maurice Carver, and I got 4 or 5 dogs from him over the years, and this was just a pup, but like I say, I'd asked for a female, and so, you know, so I could produce my own Carver stuff, you know, in a roundabout way, and so yeah, that was the plan. But I was no more excited about her than the other dogs that I got, and especially not near as excited as the first one I got, which was the Lobo dog. Simply because you know he was an adult dog ready, and very, very exciting. Very exciting.
I've done a lot of research and looked around, asked questions and whatnot, but obviously I failed to ask you litter mates. I can't find an existing litter mate. In your dealings, did he ever tell you how many were in that litter? How many females or males? Or
there was several.
He picked her out for you, or you had something to pick from, or?
Yeah, he had. They were in the pen, and I believe was only 2 females, and he said, "I'll pick you the best one, whatever." And but
you remember there was
apparently there were several of them. You know, I would say 3 or 4 from what he said, and he never really designated anything. He just he said they're out there tearing the pen down. You know,
so he didn't care about color. You didn't even ask him at the time.
No.
So before she even arrived, you didn't even know what color. You didn't even know what color it was until she arrived.
No, not at all. I don't.
Who named her?
I named her.
Okay.
I named her. Okay. Kind of young, just after the song Sugar Pie Honey Bunch, and also
Sugar Pie Honey Bunch.
Oh yeah, big. Yeah.
Who sings it? Who does it? I'm just curious.
In Motown era. Honey Bunch. I can't call them. Maybe the Four Tops, one of the old groups. But also, when I got interested in the pit bulls, I started reading the books, and I first got the Colby book. You know, that was about the first one you had access to. You know, if you were interested at that time. And reading that Colby book, I was just going through it and looking at the dogs. There was a dog in there called Colby's Bunch, and half-brother Twister, and I think they were probably all off of Colby's Pincher at the time. So, you know, and I was just impressed with that dog Bunch. And I'm thinking I'm going to put Bunch in there, and then I heard that song Sugar Pie Honey Bunch. That was a big, you know, hip-hop song at the time. And so she got her name.
One of my favorite stories has always been how La Passe's Buster was acquired from Maurice Carver. The story has it that he was traded for a bottle of Scotch whiskey. The time frame, he's sired by Bully Son out of Arts Missing. That would command a high dollar. So I did a little research and asked around, and Jack Kelly tells a better version and tells the story a lot better.
John Shiver and I were pretty good friends, and Shiver had just come back from the show out there, and he stopped by my place. He said to me, he got a dog of Carver. I says, oh yeah, which one? He says, oh, he's a Police on Arts Missing. I said, oh yeah, no kidding. Well, of course, it was I think I counted 37 pups out of that particular litter at one time. But he said, no, this dog's name is, picture up there, what's his name? Buster, La Passe's Buster. So he says, I've got Buster off of Carver. I says, no kidding. I says, pays a lot of money. John, you know, wouldn't go for a spit. He didn't have a lot of money, and he didn't want to spend any money for it. I says, how much? He said, I got him for nothing. He said, well, not really for nothing. He said, but we were standing out in Maurice's yard, and he was going around looking at all the different dogs. And two drunks come up and said they wanted to buy a dog. And they said, we like this one here. How much do you want for him? And Carver said to them, oh, he says, gee, you're just a little bit too late. He says, this is Mr. Shiver. He's from Florida. He just bought that dog. Oh, okay. So he finally got rid of him. And he says, he just bought that dog for a good bottle of scotch. So they left after a while, breaking their shoes, you know, and Carver said, can I borrow your car for a minute, Maurice? He said, sure, where you want to go? He said, I just got to see. He run down, he bought a bottle of Shiva's Regal, and he come back and he says, here's the dog. And he put the dog off the chain and put him in the car. So Maurice just left. And that's how he got Buster. And then, oddly enough, John Shiver dropped dead 2 weeks later. And Lopasse run down there and picked up the dog and took the dog back to North Carolina, and he dropped dead 2 months later. So I said, well, I wouldn't want to be the next owner. Next owner of that dog. I'm getting too old.
My first question is, when did you first meet Carver?
I would say it's in the early 50s. I would say between 53 and 54. And the reason I remember that to be is my blind dog was born in 53. And I met Carver through Mr. Trahan and had many visits with him after that.
He
became a friend.
Where did you first meet him? Where was that? Was that?
I first met him in Lafayette.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then he told us about a show that he was going to have, and invited us up there. But I had met him prior to that.
I guess so. Obviously, you had met his first wife.
Quite well. Meat looked cheap. Maurice was. When you had a gathering, he was the main attraction there. He was a very neat dresser. Very good looking man, very handsome man. And I think the little lady you talking about, she was a very small person. Blonde, if I remember correctly.
Yes, yes. You don't recall her name?
No.
Okay. Do you know who took that particular picture? It's a cafe.
It was taken in Lafayette at the place they called Four Corners, and the restaurant was named Snacks. It was taken in Lafayette, Louisiana.
You have no idea who took that picture?
I would say probably Pete Sparks.
I guess, who would you say was Maurice's mentors?
Probably, if anybody, it would be Leo Conant from Meridian, Mississippi. Him and Leo were good friends.
Is it true that Jolly sold the dog Wino? That Maurice Carver, I think it was in Lafayette. There was a show, there was a convention, and he was handling the dog called Wino, and
Maurice handled Wino 3 times. And was very successful. The dog was for Mr. Jolly out of Devon, Texas.
Okay, all right. And they say that on the way back he had sold the dog, and on the way back going home that he would ride with him.
Mr. Jolly made Carver stop the vehicle and got down. That's true.
Okay, so you know that for a fact.
Yeah. Okay. When I first met Mr. Jolly, I met him in Cleveland, Mississippi. George Sadler had a show there, and Maurice and Jolly showed up, and probably a 1958 Thunderbird, red in color, and they had a black dog named Butch, and Butch jumped out of the car. and they had to chase him down in the cotton field on the headland. I witnessed that.
Were you riding with them or behind them? Or
No. We were just all out there. And it was at the show site.
Okay.
That's what it was. And he was parked not a little bit away. And you know how it is. I mean, it got everybody's attention real quick that the dog had got out. It didn't cause any problem, but they had to run him down the headland. And I can go furthermore. We had to push that car to get it started before they left. In other words, not that particular site, but at the motel they wouldn't crank. I remember it so vividly. It wouldn't start.
Now they say that Mayfield claims that the shows, you know, everybody would stay at the motels and stuff like that. He says most of the time you would see there'd be people in the morning walking around talking amongst each other. He said that Maurice would come out of his hotel room and still wearing his PJs.
Yes.
And just scream about it as loud as he could.
Yes, I witnessed that. He was a showman. So was Earl Tudor. They were the life of the party.
Now he'd just be screaming.
Carver had stories on end. You know, he was in the military and did a good job, I understand. And he did a lot of different things. And he really, because I was young at the time and listened a lot. Carver had some hell of a stories. Yes. Interesting man.
Can you describe his second wife, Pat?
I knew Pat probably best out of the two. I met Pat when she was very young.
Before she was married to?
No, she was married to Maurice at the time.
Okay.
But she was young. I've known Maurice and Pat for quite some time.
How much age difference was there between them?
Pretty good margin, but I couldn't say how many years. But
give or take a few, 5, 10, 15?
I would say maybe more like 20.
Wow, okay.
You know, maybe somewhere along in there, maybe a little bit less, but a pretty good margin. Maybe I say this because Maurice looked a little tired, and Pat was already young and in her prime and rosy cheeks, you know.
Who would you say was the better? Who'd you like better of the two?
It's a little hard to say. The first lady had a lot of class. Very short, very neat, good looking, very snappy dresser. And Pat was a little more kicked back a little bit, you know, more like us guys, in other words. She blended in maybe a little better with the dog people. I enjoyed Pat. She had a nice dog too. That stomping all the dogs was hers, and she raised that from a pup. And I think he went on to have pretty good luck with him.
Is it true that she ran away with Maurice's yard?
Yes.
Help?
Mr. Stevens.
Dave Stevens.
Yeah. They came to Lafayette, Pat and Stevens, with a friend that I had, Richard Fisher from the Bayou. And Richard had purchased a dog from them named Scrap-On. And they had a little show there. And Pat really went overboard and extended the wagering part way too much. And when this show was over, she couldn't ante up the money. Mr. Stevens left her on the site. I witnessed. He drove up and left.
Now I always thought that
she had to get a ride to get home.
Wow. What can you tell me about Maurice's yard help? I mean, did it change over the years? Did it?
Yeah, pretty much. Maurice had a nice yard, and he was on the hill as well, as you know. And I visited that place several times. He had a lot of people that would raise dogs for him. and somebody would farm out and get back after they were grown. But he had several people that would just breed them up for him. He was very successful in the dogs. Made a lot of champions, a lot of grand champions.
Would you say he always had yard help, or it varied from time to time?
I've always seen yard help there.
Anybody else besides Dave Stevens that would come into mind? Because I have no record, or there's really nothing about his yard help.
The gentleman that I'm trying to name is a gentleman that walks with a limp. I know the man's name, he just won't come to me.
And how long do you think he stayed on with him?
Probably the longest. But a lot of people have went in and out of that estate, including Mr. Bobby Hall, who stayed there quite some.
As far as going to his place, was he always at the same place along that highway?
That's it. That's the only place I've known of. In other words, that's the only place we visited. He always talked about the big house on the hill, but we never went there. We always stayed at the, I wouldn't know what to call it. I guess it was his...
That little hill.
College, I guess you would say, but that's where we all stayed.
For somebody that never seen his yard, can you describe his yard?
From the road, the house was to the right, and the dogs were to the left, and they would go pretty far back. I don't recall, but he had several dogs at all times. And he kept his dogs in good shape. His dog was always healthy.
Seen him on cables?
Yes.
Cable runs?
Yes.
Okay. How many dogs would you say he kept at any given time, or when
About
you
35.
went? How many?
About 35. I don't witness any more than that. He may have had more at one time or another, but I didn't see that.
Well, what can you tell me about that Black Widow, Jim?
She was, so I was told, that she was really an outstanding female. She was black in color, had a scar on her right cheek, about an inch long, and a very good-looking dog. Mr. Gaboon Trahan bought it from Carver, brought it to Lafayette, and Mr. Trahan ran a boarding house at the time. And someone in Mr. Carver's group took her from Mr. Trahan one night and brought her back to Carver. And that's when Carver made the mating with Divo. But actually the owner would have been Mr. Trahan.
Is that where she died? Was on Maurice's yard because she was never recovered?
I would think so. No, she never came back to Lafayette.
Well, some say that she ended up some way back on Earl Tudor's yard.
Well, she may have. No, I couldn't say that. She may have. That I don't recall. Wish I could be of more help with that, but I can't.
Are you familiar with... There's a story, I've actually took it out and got the newspaper clipping, but there was that thing where Maurice Carver killed a man in self-defense.
Yes, I recall that, yes. Matter of fact, after that incident, he moved in with Leo Kennard.
He moved in with Leo Kennard?
Yeah, at Meridian, Mississippi, and Leo was a bootlegger at the time, ran liquor, and Carver helped him with that. And I don't recall how long Carver stayed, but he did stay there some time, because I visited them both there.
Well, speaking of his...
So did...
so would you say those were amongst his closest friends?
Yes, I would think Leo and Maurice and then Jerome Hernandez and the gentleman from Lake Charles, Roland Fontenot. Yeah.
I believe he just passed away.
There was Roland Fontenot, Jerome, Jimmy Wimberly, and Earl. It was a pretty good group. They did well.
Can you describe Maurice, if, in case you never seen him? How would he be dressed at these shows?
Well, at home, he did like Bobby Hall. He was red out of his pajamas. He wore some very fancy silk pajamas with his initials on them, you know. And when he did go out in public, just very neat, very rich looking. He was a handsome man. Always stayed well kept when he was in public. Now at home, there was a different story. He stayed in pajamas a lot. Too much, really.
Pajamas and boots.
Pardon?
Pajamas and boots.
That's it. Yep. Yep.
On your visits to his place, did he in fact have his PJs on?
Yes. Now he did change to come outside on occasions. You know, when we went out to look at the dogs, he would change, but 80% of the time he was in them PJs, but that was his style.
But they, like Mayfield once told me, he was basically, his signature was the cowboy boots and that Stetson hat.
That's it. He described him well.
Okay. How about, nobody could ever remember what he'd smoked. Remember his brand of cigarettes?
No. I think, talking about smokes, Lee O'Connor had the best setup. He had all brands of cigarettes, all brands of cigars. And I've noticed that Carver would switch from one brand to another. But at home, I really couldn't say because I personally never did smoke, so I didn't, I focused more on the dogs. That's what I was there for.
You ever do any breedings?
Pardon?
You ever do any breedings or trade any dogs with Maurice?
No, but I gave him several dogs. I gave him several, and so that I gave Leo several.
Did he ever give you any?
No. He came home to breed, though. He bred to my blind dog. He brought a, he was, at the time, had a friend that was high up in the Air Force, and I don't recall the rank. But that gentleman had a buckskin female that called a North Lafayette to breed to the blind dog and produced, I think he called it Blondie, and I forget the male dog's name. Got away from it right now.
Okay.
The last thing I did for Maurice was I gave him a little red female that I had raised in a blacksmith shop to give to a friend of his. He had a friend, Mr. Maurice Coyne, who was a chicken man. And the little red female was a full sister of Spook that I gave Jerry Clements, which was Goddess on him in small.
Hey, you mentioned the chickens. What can you tell me about the chickens? Nobody could really tell me that much about.
Well, Maurice had some nice chickens. The last breed of chickens he had was some white chickens. Now you was asking about Maurice's chicken?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, he was a good chicken man. Him and Jolly both. They won a lot of derbies. And the last chickens were white, and I'd like the, I know the name of the chicken, it just got away from me.
Okay.
I can't think of it.
Would he have a lot of chickens at his place?
No. No. Didn't keep a lot of chickens. Not that I witnessed.
If you can go back and bring to any of those Carver dogs, not your own, Carver dog, I'm just interested to hear what you were
Pardon me? I didn't know of any true Carver dog that he had. It was, because he would switch. Whatever was hot at the time, he would get on that bandwagon. There was whatever was popular, and I wish I could tell you more about his dogs, but I can't. I could fabricate something, but it's not necessary. I think what made him the most famous towards the end was poor Bullison, I guess. You know, he bred him a lot and had a lot of good luck with him. And at the end, mistreated Bullison again. Should have never brought him up.
We're going to hit that topic.
Okay, go ahead. I'm through with that.
Okay. There's a lot of people say he was a drinker, but I don't think anybody I've ever talked to say they ever seen him intoxicated.
Ever seen him what?
Intoxicated.
No, I've never seen that either.
Okay. So he was just
I can honestly say, all the time that we visited, he's always been very alert. Very alert. Didn't miss a stroke.
One thing I can't find, or put a finger on, his occupation, Maurice's occupation, or besides selling dogs. I'm talking about, did he ever do anything for a living that you might have known about?
He told me once, like when you first started the dogs, he started the dogs after the Second World War. He started about in 46. And his brother was in the construction business, heavy machinery. So I think Carver was an operator. And then he told me at one time that he had a job for the government, if I understand correctly, something like the hook and mouth disease in cattle. And I can't say any more about that besides, I think he worked, if I understand correctly what he told us was, it was something to do with the border and cattle and the hook and mouth disease. That's about the extent of that. The time I've known him, I've never known him to work.
Okay.
Because he'd come to like that and stayed 2 weeks at a time. And the time he stayed at Maurice, stayed at Leo's. He wasn't working then.
Now, when I hear the stories about him being a salesman, what can you say about Maurice as a salesman?
He was a great salesman. He's the gentleman that would tell you what you wanted to hear, and as soon as you told him what you were looking for, he had it. He may have had more than this, but he may have had a dozen puppies in a pen. And whatever you asked him for, he would go in and catch one and say, this is it.
Maurice was a peculiar fella. His heritage was French, German, Spanish, and I think Dutch. I'm not sure, but I think Dutch. He spoke of his heritage several times, a number of times. I'm pretty close, right about in there. But I know I've heard people talk about his blue eyes. Maurice had black eyes. He didn't have blue eyes. Maurice was a black-eyed man. And it was strange hearing different people talk about Maurice's blue eyes. And for him to be such a black-eyed man and read and hear people's stories talking about him that way, in a sense that there's so many people that just didn't know Maurice at all. They didn't know him at all, and especially the people of today. The very few that really knew Maurice and knew him for the real person he really was. This friend of mine, Creel, J.C. Creel, in San Antonio, he was a man in the game, and it was real interesting the way he appeared in the game. And he was the man that trimmed all of Maurice Carver's ears, all of his puppy's ears. And Maurice never did give him any credit for that. Maurice always capitalized the credit when someone would ask him, Do you trim those dogs' ears, or does the vet trim those dogs' ears for you? Beautiful ear trim dogs. Maurice would always rear back and say, oh, I'd do it myself, and let the mama lick them dry when they're 3 days old. Well, that wasn't true. This fella Krill, he was the one that trimmed all those puppies' ears, and Maurice would deal him a pup or two when he would trim his ears for him. And he had all of the tools for it. He was, you know, a real master at trimming ears. And Krill always was upset because Maurice never gave him any credit for the beautiful ear trims that he put on the dog's ears.
As with so many breeders, James Crenshaw had much success with dogs directly from the yard of Maurice. A legendary breeder in his own right, James Crenshaw started out with a few dogs from Maurice back in the 70s and never had to change up his breeding program. Here he can be seen giving us some few choice words to live by, the secret of his success.
I'll make sure they're 100% healthy. And good exercise.
This video clip showcases yet another elite breeder, Mr. James Crenshaw, most famous for the Jeep dog he bred, but also has a long resume of established dogs that derive from his breeding efforts. Years ago, he purchased several dogs directly from Maurice. Here Crenshaw is shown with one of his favorites. This is an excellent example of descendants down from the few dogs he acquired decades ago. This is Blackjack. He is a cross between the Rascal dog and the Honey Bunch dog with a little bit of Red Boy thrown in for good measure. Blackjack is an excellent example and a terrific representative of the Jeep Red Boy Rascal line. James Crenshaw is now currently retired and deservedly has a spot in the Dogmen Hall of Fame. Without James, there would be a lot of holes in the pedigree of our dogs today. So James, here's to you.
Well, we've been taken out to see dogs, and if it hadn't been for Bobby Smith, or whatever his name was, I wouldn't have gone out there at all, but he took me out, and Carver tried to apologize this last time at Dallas about not showing me around, said he was busy and worked up over the convention and everything like that, but I'm sure if he came up here to my place, I wouldn't just sit in the yard under a tree and let him go around and leave the dogs by himself. I think I'd get out there and show him the dogs, and I'd be proud enough of their breeding to go out and tell him what I had, but maybe he's a little more callous that way than I would be. I have to stop you all the time, and I have to stop in the middle of my feeding or watering or cleaning up around the dog or whatever it is. Take them around, sure, maybe takes as much as an hour. But I enjoy doing it because it's my hobby, and I'm proud of the breeding, and I figure the more people that knows about my dogs, well, the better.
As we go pay our last respects to Carver, I can't help but think that it wasn't but 2 days after Carver had died, and his home and yard were left empty, completely empty, looted by people who came looking for keepsakes, mementos, and souvenirs. No one can tell me who ended up with Maurice's remaining dogs. They were probably looted as well. There's a lot more to Carver than what this documentary shows. What most people don't know is that Maurice Carver killed a man in his home in self-defense. Maurice was in the armed forces and was very well schooled out in hand-to-hand combat. As I go to pay my last respects to the one they call the San Antonio Rose, I can't help but feel his presence lingering by. Most everybody I spoke to that really knew him spoke about his true gift, the gift of clear vision, the ability to be able to see something in a short time. He could see things others couldn't. I believed them. If the fraternity decided on celebrating the birthday of one of the most influential breeders of the past century,
the list would be great. But rest assured, Maurice Carver would probably be among the top 10 on everybody's list. If it were up to me, November 2nd would be declared a national holiday.